This is SketchUp. I don't know if the volume is going to be on or not, but this is what we're going to look at quickly in a way to reduce file size. Polygon count, material size and purge, components, 3D warehouse, scrap file and purge, zooming, styles, layers on and off. Okay, those are the things we need to look at. If I go and look at my machine quickly, and I do a search on my machine for the SketchUp files that I have on my machine over the 15 years I've been working with SketchUp, and I order them by file size, the biggest file I have on my machine is only 280 megabytes. Travis yesterday had a file of 780, wasn't it? Something like that. It was almost 3 times the size of this file. Okay, so a big file is a problem, and this is a 6-story building that's been done as an experimentation out of another program. So if I open it quickly and just show you, the complexity of this building is 6 floors, and it's a big building. Let's see if it actually even opens. And we take it from there. So even my computer's going a little slow with opening this file. And it was because it was an export from another software, so all the lines and everything are exploded, and SketchUp hasn't been the author of anything. It's just try to deal with the actual hardware of it. That's what we're talking about. And let's see if that opens. And that's all the 6-story building. And then the biggest one that I've done that I can see through, okay, so this one is 208 megabytes, but it's a student's work from a previous year. This one is 104. It's Kaylin McRae's project, interior design, so 104 megs. So students tend to obviously have quite big files, so there's a trend here. And it's just interior stuff, not even a whole building. This one is a skate park that I did, so maybe I'll open this one. This is only 108 megabytes, and this is a whole precinct. It's not even an interior design project, so let's open this one as well. Let's see what's happening. The reason I know it's taking so long, there it is there. So this is saved in version 15 of SketchUp, much earlier version. Okay. And it's opening it off my server, so it's opening it over an internet connection, not over a hard drive connection. So that's well, it's going to it has to download it each time from the internet. That's why it takes a little while to load. Okay, so let's see how we can deal with this file. It might be a little bit slow, but that just kind of illustrates the problem. What I'm going to do is then I'm going to save this to my desktop for today's exercise, and also it'll update the version of it. Hello. Illustrating how slow things can be. There you go. Spinning beach ball. And my computer is pumping up the fans here. I'm going to save this to my hard drive. I don't know if you guys work off a OneDrive or a cloud drive or anything. But are you for saving stuff, not for working on stuff? If you're working on files, it's important that they're on your C drive, not on any external or any cloud service. They must be on your hard drive. Every time you save, it now tries to sync it up to your cloud service, and it's going to take even longer. So I'm just going to save this on the desktop quickly. And I'm also going to save this other one on the desktop. So we can then go see how big they each are. So this is a 6-story building. Look, it doesn't have all the internals, but it's got a lot of balustrading and screens and door and window elements on it. And it's a big site.
So at the end of this, will you show us how to
reduce it?
Just delete files that are unnecessary?
No, how to reduce the size of things.
Because I mean, when I started this volunteering for SketchUp was working fine, but then it's just running slow. Obviously, so I know there's just this project law that's.
No, it's the way you're working in it. And the way, so as you're working on it, you're adding. It's like working in a file or anything. You just end up with more clutter.
Yeah.
And the more clutter just makes things more difficult for the software to deal with it. Okay, so here we go. Huh? Yeah, yours is doing all the time. Exactly. Oh, so there's something else I'm going to add onto this thingy is this. Come on. This one is AutoSave. Okay, so there's all the list of things. Hey. Yeah. Okay, so now if I go back to my file list, I'm just going to open desktop. I'm going to see, okay, here's my two SketchUp files, 108 and 280. But they saved on my desktop, so they'll go a little bit quicker. And what I want to do quickly is just show you some of the issues that we're going to have here. It's still, I might work with the skate park one, because the other one I knew was problematic even when I worked on it. Oh, come on. This is no good. I'm going to close it when it opens. Oh, come on. What's also not helping is I'm recording everything, so my machine's been taxed in that regard too. Come on. We can download it from the website. No. Oh, you might have. Not me. I don't know about you guys. Yeah, like you mean like a trial? Trial. Oh, just keep on adding new email address. Keep adding new email address. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about here now quickly is Polygon Count. Okay, so this is a fairly big project as well. This was done just off Florida Road. Let's take that off. Okay. So if you remember, you know that park opposite Florida Road? How's it here? where the skaters all park there. Florida Road is actually here, and Spiga was on this corner. Yeah, this park's quite cool. They put a whole lot of trees there. This is where that fence was that they put all the Mediba locks on and stuff. Anyway, this is a blank site. We're proposing like a community skate park here, and this is all modeled in SketchUp. Okay, there's a sports education arena. It's supposed to be a skate park, arena, blah, 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 blah. Skate ramps, buses, a lot of photo match stuff, which is all this building. Trees, these are 2D trees, which also helps with your 3D count. So 2D trees over 3D trees are much better because they're just a face, not a 3D component. But if I go into my file and find my, I'm trying to find my properties here, window, model info, where is it, model info, tell me here. It's geolocated, classifications, components, credits, trying to find dimensions, file. There's the size, I'm trying to see if it'll tell me, stats, here we go. So here's the stats on my file. It's got 540,000 edges and 254,000 faces and 1,356 components or instances of components inside my model. I can purge a whole lot of unused stuff here, and I can fix problems if there's my thingy. So this is under your options or your preferences. But what I want to look at specifically, so it's a fairly big file in terms of the amount of content that's here. But how I can reduce my file size is two main ways. One is materials and one is components. So if I go look at my materials outline or my material docker, which you guys know how to get to, and I click on the little house over here, it'll show me all my materials that are loaded into my file. Some of these are literally Google Earth snapshots. This one is a material that I've loaded myself. This is an image of a building, photos that I've loaded. So if you've taken photos and you've loaded photos off a cell phone photos are often like 4 or 6 megabytes on their own. So these have all been loaded into my project. There are a whole lot of materials here. Let me go quick checkly. Let me go see if this tells me how many materials I have in here. Materials, 266 materials. So if I go to my materials and I click on this button over here for Mac, it's under list. On a Windows machine, there's a little arrow off on the right hand side here, which looks like a little house with an arrow. But you find this button called Purge Unused. And you purge unused, it'll get rid of all the materials that you're not using and only keep the materials that are currently in the model. So my material list has stayed, it's jumped to about 10 materials, I think. I don't know if it was 260 and 250. Okay, so it's dropped some materials. So it's done that. Also, purging materials is fine, but if you're still using a very high resolution material, that'll still be in your file. So sometimes it makes sense to, when you bring a material in, make sure that it's not a super high resolution like a 20 meg PSD or some kind of file. Try and bring in materials that you're importing. So when I say bring in, when you go and import texture, make sure that the file that you're choosing isn't huge. And if it's massive, then just resample it or save it down as half or whatever. How's it? I'm just going through some SketchUp stuff for reducing file sizes because people are struggling with lagging SketchUp. So, but purging of materials will obviously get rid of what you're not using. But if you are using one that's still a high resolution, then it makes sense maybe to delete that file and bring in a smaller resolution file of that type. Check, but it is something to look at. Okay, so that's 252. Mine's dropped by that. The other one that is worth reducing is components. The same way, open your components, click on the little house, it'll show you all your components that are loaded in your model. Okay, if I go here and look at components, I've got I think 211 component definitions here. That's all of those. Yes. Yeah, I'm screen recording it. And if you click on this button, so this button is the same in the Windows machine. For some reason, the materials in a Mac is different. The materials in a Mac one is down under list. And you click on list and you go purge unused. And if purge unused, like here, is gray, that means there are no more to purge. You've purged all of them already. So that's good to know. Under components, if I come back to components and I click on here, and I've got option, it's black, which means there are some components I can purge unused. I've currently got 211. If I say purge unused, drops to 204. So I lost about 10 components I wasn't using. And what that does is it gets rid of polygons that you don't need, lines that you don't need. And often what happens is those components are not even in your model, but they are loaded in your library. This components docker on the side here is a library of all the components that you may or may not have used in the beginning. It happens very similarly in very simple versions of SketchUp. If we're working even just with the basic 2017 in this case, let's go to this one. That. If I delete Lizanne, come on. Oh my word. Lizanne is a component. If I delete her from my model, but I go to my components list, she's still here. This component is a library of all the components that may have been in your model, which is cool because if I wanted to use Lizanne again, I don't have to copy and paste her. I can just put her into the model and there she is. But if I delete her and then I go purge unused, there it is, it'll delete her from my library. If, however, I've got Lizanne in here and I go to purge unused, there is no purge unused because I'm using this component in that model. So let's go through that exercise again. I delete Lizanne. I go here, I say purge unused, Lizanne disappears. I cannot add her back into the model. I'd need to go and search for Lizanne again on the 3D warehouse. Let's see if I can even find her. Probably if I spelled her name correctly. Liz or Liz, who knows. And I'd have to add the component back in. There's another kind of Lizanne. Whoa, there's Cowboy Lizanne, Cowgirl Lizanne. If I go to my model, there's she there, 3D component, face me, blah, 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 blah. Right, we'll get to that now about loading stuff into the model. If I wanted to load Lizanne into this model, I don't go and do a 3D search in this file and add stuff straight from 3D Warehouse to this file. The reason being is because I don't know the quality of the 3D component I'm getting. Somebody else has modeled it, and there might be a flippin' first-year interior designer, and you don't know what the hell they've done with that component. So you make sure by going to your scrap file. So I'd normally title this. I'm going to actually title it now. I'm going to call it Scrap Project 01, and I'd save it in the same place where my other file's going. In this case, it's desktop, and I would save that, and I'd keep this as a scrap file. Let this get it, and I don't care about styles here. I don't care about moving. I'm just keeping it for all my components. So I want to go find a dog. I think I've done this before, and it was like a whole city. It's hard to find these examples. But all I want is a dog. And there's a dog. There's a dog. There's a dog. There's a dog. This looks like a dog. There we go. Oh, look, a dog. Let's go find the actual dog. Where's the dog here? See? No dog. No flippin' dog. First year. Check. Hidden geometry. Still no dog. Don't know what's going on with this particular project. It's fine. Anyway, it's whatever. I don't care. It's my scrap file. I'm going to go find another dog component. There's a big dog there. What is this? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Obviously, that's a dog. I mean, what else could it be? People load this stuff on the warehouse. Let's see. Okay, so say now this is the dog that I wanted. Ew. But in this particular file, I see the dog and I'm like, oh cool. If I just loaded this dog into my skate park and then went and checked view hidden geometry, I would have thought, oh flip, I've got this chick here. I didn't want her. But she's now come in and I didn't need to have her there. So the reason I loaded it into another file is I can come into this file, I can find this chicky plicky, and she is called, let's see if we turn entity info, she's also a SketchUp person. She's Helen. I don't want Helen, I've now got two Helens here. What I do is I delete Helen from my component. I check by turning on hidden geometry that there is nothing else hidden in here. I make sure under layers that all the layers that I have, of which there is only one, that all those layers are visible, that there's nothing here. Then I take my dog, and I copy my dog, and I take my dog through to my SketchUp file that I'm actually working on, which is this one, and I put dog here. There's dog. I want to rotate dog. that he is sitting uprightish. Go. Get upright dog. Now I know that this dog, I hate saying it because it doesn't look like one, is just the dog. There's no like city that's been modeled behind the dog because it came out of a massive town planning project. It's just dog. And if I go view, hidden geometry, just to check, I can see hidden geometry on my model. It's fine because it's all curved surfaces, but dog is just dog, perfect. That is a good way to make sure that stuff you're bringing from the component warehouse or 3D warehouse is just the thing you need and not everything else that you don't need. Because even if you go and purge components, if these things are all included together as one component, it sees them as one entity even though some things are hidden. And so you're going to have a problem with those files later on. Okay, so we need to make sure we're purging and we're keeping all these things neat. That is... Switching back to this other file, and this is a fairly big file. I mean, when I say big, it's big, as big as it should be, and not big like yours guys are. Because yours guys are like massively big. This is only 100 megabytes. So if I come back here and look at what we're talking about, I'm going to get rid of this thing behind here, which was supposed to be a okay. So the thing is, Polygon Count we've looked at, material size and purge, we've looked at purging that, components, 3D warehouse, scrap file, and purge. We've done all that stuff. Bring in components from the 3D warehouse into a separate file that you've called scrap project 1 or project 1 scrap or whatever. Save it in the same location as your other folder. I'm recording all of this stuff on screen so you can watch it later. Lucky you guys. Zooming. This is something that Yasmin was talking about. She's working in a project and it's pretty big and it's taking a long time to do anything. I'm going to save this just for saving purposes. This is me saving, which is why it's spinning like this. The reason it's often spinning while you're working on it is doing an autosave in the background. So let's talk about autosave quickly. If I go to File, Preferences, wherever you find it on a Mac or PC, and you go, I'm just going to close this for now, and you go to General, Autosave. Create a backup. Yes, we'd like to have a backup. That's the SKB file, SketchUp backup. And we'd like to autosave. Increase the number of minutes on this. You're probably not doing something every 5 minutes that's so dramatic that you're going to waste 5 minutes if you have to redo it. So make this 10, make this 15, make this 20. The idea is that if the file is open and you walk away from your machine and you've done something without saving, in 10 minutes time it'll save it for you. So you are creating a backup. But if this is doing this every 5 minutes you're getting a beach ball or an hourglass sprinting on your machine and you're sitting for 5 minutes. So you're wasting 10 minutes. Okay. So in your preferences, turn this up a little bit higher. I think most of yours are 10. I've set mine to 5. I've set mine to 10. And there's that. Okay, what did I want to talk about? It wasn't autosave. It was the next thing. Zooming. Zooming. Be smart about zooming. Yes, you've got a middle mouse wheel and you can keep zooming like this all day, every day, and panning around and doing certain things. Double-clicking the middle wheel zooms to the extent of your model. Most cases, if you've got an actual middle wheel. Or you use the buttons that are here. There are 4 buttons that SketchUp gives you specifically for zooming functions. The one is the zoom button, which is basically just activating zoom, and you click and you drag and you move in and out. The other one is zoom to window, which is super helpful. If I actually just wanted to zoom in on the bus, all I do is now draw a window around the bus, boom, and it zooms to my bus. And then I can move around. Then if I want to go back out, instead of rolling all the way back out, because now SketchUp has to render everything as it's moving out, make sure it knows where all the lines are, I click on this button, which is zoom extents, like in CAD, zoom space E. It'll zoom to my whole model. I get a good overview of where everything is. And then I can zoom to the next thing, which is this window. I wanted to zoom on the entrance, and I wanted to move around the entrance. If I don't like that, I can always use this, which is a previous zoom, and it clicks back through my previous zoom cycles and takes me perhaps to where I was through about a 4 or 5 step process. So it's not infinite. It takes you through the same process 4 or 5 times, and it'll just keep cycling through. That's one way to do the zooming. The other way is to have these tabs set up at the top, where you've got your default kind of scenes that you want to look at. I rendered this scene. I rendered this scene, which is a slightly oblique view. I think I was creating a bit of animation. So I rendered a whole lot of different scenes for this particular thing. My scenes are obviously not labeled very cleverly. They're just scene 1 through to 9. But you could have your entrance view, plan view, interior elevation. And instead of trying to zoom around your model the whole time, you just click on your different scenes and you can fly to that section without having to scroll and zoom and scroll and zoom and scroll and zoom. Obviously, if your model is not that big and it's not beach balling on you the whole time, then zooming around is okay. This is nice to have when you don't have that functionality. Okay, so that's zooming. Makes sense? Cool. The next item is styles. When modeling in SketchUp, always make sure that you're using a default modeling up style. Not any of the fancy, sketchy, wavy, partially transparent styles. The reason being is because SketchUp takes your basic lines and applies a filter to them each time. It's basically like creating an Instagram filter on your model each time you're working through it. So every time you change your view, SketchUp needs to make sure it knows where all the lines are and then apply that filter. Okay? Cool, yeah, let me finish. Right? Don't interrupt me when I'm on a roll. Come on. So if you go to your styles, however they might look on the PC, and you go to look, there are your basic styles. There are a whole lot of these extra ones you can get. Some of them are really nice. Style Builder competition winners. This is pencil edges with a white border. See how long it took? It actually took my computer a little bit of time to figure out what was going on. Lines with wide marker. It's figuring out what's going on. And then it loads it. There's pencil on light brown. All kinds of weird things. Where's the one that I used to like quite a lot? I used to use it. Stain edges with a frame. You can create styles. And it creates this frame around my thing, which is great and groovy. But every time now I need to, come on, let's move. Come on. Okay, all right, there you see what it does in the background. It reduces everything to basic lines, hides all the material so I can think about what's going on, and then stop, and it renders it back up again. So if you're working with styles, you're slowing down your modeling ability. So what I suggest doing is going to default styles and choosing any of the default ones. What I can do is just make these look like thumbnails so that they're easier to see. Choose a default style, which is blue faces on the inside, white faces on the outside, and basic lines, no dots, no extensions, no weird things. We can edit all these things here. Profiles, depth cube, extension. I mean, we can make it look like it's thingy. We can make the extensions on these things fly past each other. We can do all sorts of weird. We can endpoints on here. We can put some jitter on there. All these things that you add to your file are making it heavy for moving around in. So what we want to do is make sure that we're keeping a basic style, and we're using that. And then obviously we can make it, we can change things. So we can make our materials look like actual materials, or we can just use this one, which is a basic color representation of a material. I'll show you what that might look like now. So here, for example, there's my trees. My trees are rendered quite simply. I can't even see. So my trees are just showing here as block color because they are 2D elements. If I turn on actual materials, my trees show as the actual material of the tree. So modeling up, in fact, normally what I have often is in my first scene is just called my working scene. It's very basic rendering, it's basic lines, it's no thickness, no endpoint, no jitter, no nothing. It's my working tab, and if I want to, I'll click onto another scene which shows me my model in a nice rendered view, just to make me feel good about myself. So keep things quite simple from a materials point of view and from a styles point of view. Okay, so you want to keep it. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, if you have your model view like this with the materials turned off and shadows and everything turned off, then and you save it, it'll normally save a smaller file size than if you save it with all your materials and stuff showing. Something else worth mentioning actually while I'm here now as well, and I haven't put it on this particular, is that one. We'll get to that. So styles we spoke about. Layers on and off. When working in SketchUp and you've got all these awesome things on, there's no point having everything turned on when you're working on something that's got nothing to do with them. So if I was working on this ramp, for example, and what I've done is I've grouped it purposefully, so when I go into it to edit it, I use this quite a lot, which is View, Component Edit, Hide Rest of Model. That component hide rest of model is great because it gets rid of everything that I don't need, and my computer doesn't have to think about it for a moment while I work on this particular ramp detail, and I can be working on stuff here. That's helpful. It gets less helpful when, for example, I might have something like this that's a group and I want to work on that, and now that disappears, and then I need to come out of that to work on this, and then by mistake I click out of this and my whole model comes back. And I keep jumping between different things, but it is helpful for some stuff. Another way around this to work on something specifically is to have your layers set up properly. Now, probably mine aren't set up 100% properly, but we'll see. And what I'd normally do, and I probably haven't done it in this case, is I'll have certain groupings of things. So what I would go and do, I'll just show you as an example because I can't verify whether I've done it on this particular file. This is a pretty quick project. This is done in a day or two, I think. So what I've done, what I would do is I'd go and select all my trees, because those are nice sort of enhancements. I don't need to have them on all the time. I'd make a group out of those things. Come to my layers, I create a new layer. Normally what I do with my layers from a practice point of view is if it's my own layer, I put a full stop in front of it so it floats to the top. Because if you bring in stuff from a warehouse, sometimes the layer's all kind of weird, even if you brought it through your own scrap file. And I'd go trees. And I would call up that layer again, select it, go entity info, and I would put this onto layer trees. Should be at the top. There it is, yeah, floats to the top. It's on layer trees. And now what I can do is I can turn off trees while I'm working on my model. There's some more that I forgot about. That's fine. I've got a layer for them. I can select these guys. Don't even have to group them. Make sure that I put them onto the layer trees. And there they are. And trees is visible. Again, with layers, I can also purge layers that I'm not using, which might be from components that I've purged. Who knows? But that's a good way to work on SketchUp as well, to turn off stuff that you don't need while you're working on it, and then just make sure you turn them back on again, or you can make them turn on according to your layers and stuff. So you can go put all sorts of things on layers. I can put all my cars, I can put onto a layer, my people I can put onto a layer, all the stuff that's enhancement stuff that you don't need there all the time. I think Travis had planting around like the whole perimeter. Have those all on one layer. You don't need the planting there, turn it on later, put it on a layer, turn that layer off. SketchUp doesn't have to think about it until you turn it on later again. Okay, so that's layers. Any questions there with layers? So layers, another thing to say with layers is everything I draw is on layer 0. I try not to draw on different layers because it gets complicated. Everything is drawn on layer 0, but all my groups and components, then I'll put those on a layer so that those layers are controlling things, not lines. So it's controlling things like a car or a stadium or an entrance or a ramp or whatever. So layers are for groups in my mind, not so much just for drawing. CAD, you're using layers for every type of line, because CAD only does lines because it's simple, simplistic. Whereas SketchUp is doing 3D things, the things then get put on layers, not necessarily on lines. Okay. Last item, or last few items. AutoSave we've spoken about. Turn that up from 5 to 10 or 15. Shadows. Shadows is just a thing you might have realized yourself. If you have shadows on in your file, it makes it a little bit harder to move around as well, because every time you move, SketchUp waits for a little while, figures out where the shadows need to go, and it's trying to figure out my shadows, and it's figured out the shadows, and there's my shadows. So turning shadows off just makes it a little bit quicker for it to move around, because it doesn't have to do the shadow calculation every time. Shadows are hard to calculate. It's got to figure out where the sun is relative to your building, generate lines. Okay, that line is blocked out by this face, but that face is partially transparent, so light might come. There's a lot of calculations your computer needs to do in that short space of time, and we think, yes, this thing is slow. You try and calculate shadows. Not easy. So shadows helps as well. And I think that is... So to recap, Polygon Count, not something that you're focusing on. It's just a way for me to show how big a file might be. I got that under model info, just to show you an example. The Polygon Count on this particular model, I've got 221 faces. Most of those are because of this knot dog. And all of these, we can see hidden line, those are all faces around there, that's 221. If I look at this particular model, and I go look at the faces here, I've got 254,722. So your faces get big quite quickly. And that's what SketchUp is using to represent stuff. Everything is a face made up of lines. There's nothing really else to it, and then materials applied to that face. Okay. Material size and purge. In your materials dialog or your paint dialog is unmack under list, purge unused. You've already got a material here that I can purge because I'm not using it because I deleted some of those components. So look at all the materials I've got here. There's all my materials. Look at all of them, blah, 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 but I'm not using most of them. Purge unused, and it will reduce it accordingly. Those are the materials that are actually my model. If I go now and delete this chickie, and I go to my list of materials, there should be some more that I can purge here. Oh, I know why. Because in components, she is still there. So if I get rid of these things completely, purge unused components, then come back to my colors, see what's on my colors, and I go here, yeah, I've got materials that I don't need, I can purge unused, and I've just got 2 materials. All I've got is 2 materials, which is probably the font color or this dog. Not dog. This dog is weird. Is there a material on this dog? No real material. I don't know what material that would be. Anyway. So I've purged all those things again. That's material size and purge. If you've purged all your materials and your file still seems big, you might have a material in here that's a 20 megabyte photo that you took on an HDR camera and you brought it in to use a piece of it this big. If you're only using a small piece of it, rather go and edit that image elsewhere, crop it to the piece you need and bring that piece in. Don't bring in a whole Google Street View if you're not going to use the whole, or Google Aerial View if you're just going to use a part of it. So it's just managing your information in. Components, 3D warehouse. Always bring components into a separate SketchUp file because, dog, you never know what you're going to get. So bring it into a separate SketchUp file, turn on hidden geometry, make sure everything you need is there, delete everything you don't need so that your component reduces to just its boundaries like this. All I need is the dog. This is showing the boundaries. Save it as a scrap file so you can find it later, and then purge in your working file to make sure that you're not keeping components you don't need. Zooming, use the zoom tools. There's a whole lot of them here. Zoom, zoom window, zoom extents, zoom previous. Make sure you're using the zoom functions, and then also use scene tabs across the top, which helps as well. Layers, group big components and things in layers that you can turn off, like planting, people, cars, pot plants, things that you don't need all the time to be on, lights, things that are complicated. Put them on a layer, turn that layer off while you're working. AutoSave, bump it from 5 to 15. Shadows, keep shadows off while you're working. And that should be that. Any questions before I turn off the screen record? I'm going to turn it off anyway. Yeah. Where is this thing still screen recording? Stop screen